My wife's single friends convinced her to leave me because they said I was holding her back from living her best life, so I gave her exactly what she wanted, and now she's begging me to come home after seeing what single life really costs. Here I am trying to make sense of how my marriage of 9 years completely fell apart because my wife's bitter single friends convinced her that being married to me was somehow preventing her from reaching her full potential and living her best life. My wife Emma and I have been together since college, married for 9 years, and I genuinely thought we had built a solid life together. We own a beautiful house in a great neighborhood, we both have good careers, we travel regularly, and we've been talking seriously about starting a family. I thought Emma was happy with our life, but apparently her single friends had other ideas about what happiness should look like. Let me give you some background on Emma's friend group because understanding these women is crucial to understanding how this whole situation spiraled out of control. Emma has 3 close friends from college: Rachel, who's 31 and has been single for the past 4 years after a messy breakup with her long-term boyfriend; Madison, who's 32 and goes through boyfriends like most people go through coffee filters; and Chloe, who's 30 and proudly calls herself a serial dater who refuses to settle down because she's convinced there's always someone better out there. These 3 women have been Emma's closest friends since our sophomore year, and they've been a constant presence in our relationship from the very beginning. At first, I thought it was sweet that Emma had such close friendships, and I encouraged her to maintain those relationships because I believe that having good friends is important for everyone. But over the years, I started noticing that Emma's mood and attitude toward our relationship would shift dramatically after spending time with these women. She would come home from girls' nights out questioning things about our marriage that had never been issues before, or she would suddenly start complaining about aspects of our life together that she had previously seemed perfectly happy with. The pattern became so predictable that I could literally tell when Emma had been hanging out with her friends based on her behavior toward me. After a weekend trip with the girls, she would come home distant and critical. After their weekly wine nights, she would start picking fights about household responsibilities or our social life. After their group text conversations, she would make comments about how other couples were more adventurous or romantic than we were. At first, I tried to address Emma's concerns whenever she brought them up because I wanted to be a good husband who listened to his wife's needs. If she said we didn't go out enough, I would plan more date nights. If she said we needed more excitement in our relationship, I would suggest new activities or weekend trips. If she said I wasn't romantic enough, I would bring her flowers or plan surprise dinners. But nothing I did ever seemed to be enough, and I started to realize that Emma's complaints weren't really about me or our marriage. They were about the lifestyle that her single friends were living and the pressure they were putting on her to want the same things they wanted. Rachel, Madison, and Chloe spent their weekends bar hopping, going to clubs, traveling to different cities for spontaneous adventures, and dating multiple men at once. They would post constantly on social media about their glamorous single lives, making it look like they were living in some kind of romantic comedy where every night was an exciting adventure. What they didn't post about were the Sunday morning hangovers, the anxiety about their biological clocks ticking, the financial stress of maintaining their party lifestyles, or the loneliness that came from never having a stable partner to share their lives with. They only showed Emma the highlight reel of single life, and they constantly told her that she was missing out on these experiences by being tied down to a husband. The real problem started about a year ago when Emma began her current job at a marketing firm where she works with several other young professionals who are also single and living what she calls the city life. Between her college friends and her new coworkers, Emma was suddenly surrounded by people who viewed marriage as a burden rather than a blessing. These women would tell Emma stories about their dating adventures, their spontaneous trips, their freedom to make decisions without consulting anyone else, and their ability to focus entirely on their careers without having to consider a spouse's needs or opinions. They made single life sound like an endless series of opportunities and experiences that married people couldn't access. At the same time, they would constantly criticize Emma's married life and make her feel like she was settling for less than she deserved. They would ask her why she was wasting her prime years being a housewife when she could be traveling the world and advancing her career. They would tell her that I was holding her back from reaching her full potential and that she would never know what she was truly capable of until she was free from the constraints of marriage. Emma started coming home from work and girls' nights with a completely different perspective on our relationship. She would tell me that her friends thought I was too controlling because I liked to know her plans when she went out late. She would say that they thought our weekend routines were boring and that we should be doing more exciting things with our time. Most damaging of all, her friends convinced Emma that wanting to start a family was a trap that would end her independence forever. They told her that having children would destroy her career prospects and turn her into a suburban mom who had given up on her dreams. They painted motherhood as some kind of prison sentence that would steal her identity and her freedom. I tried to talk to Emma about how her friends' opinions were affecting our marriage, but she would get defensive and accuse me of trying to isolate her from her support system. She said that her friends cared about her happiness and wanted what was best for her, and that I should be grateful that she had people in her life who were looking out for her interests. The situation came to a head 6 months ago when Emma came home from a weekend girls' trip to Miami and announced that she needed space to figure out what she really wanted from life. She said that spending time with her friends had made her realize that she felt trapped and unfulfilled in our marriage, and that she needed to explore who she was as an individual before she could commit to our future together. I was devastated because this conversation came completely out of nowhere from my perspective. As far as I knew, we had been happy in planning our future together, and suddenly Emma was telling me that she felt trapped and needed to find herself. I asked Emma what specifically was making her feel trapped, and she gave me a list of complaints that sounded like they had been written by her friends. She said I was too predictable and didn't challenge her to grow as a person. She said our lifestyle was too domestic and boring, and that she wanted to experience more adventure and spontaneity. She said she felt like she was living someone else's life instead of her own. When I pointed out that we traveled regularly, tried new restaurants, went to concerts and shows, and had plenty of adventures together, Emma said that none of those things counted because they were things we did as a couple. She wanted to experience independence and make decisions without having to consider anyone else's preferences or schedules. Emma also said that her friends had helped her realize that she had gotten married too young and had never had the chance to discover who she was as a single adult. She felt like she had gone straight from being her parents' daughter to being my wife without ever learning to be Emma the independent woman. I tried to explain to Emma that marriage doesn't have to mean losing your identity or independence, and that we could work together to make sure she felt fulfilled and challenged within our relationship. I suggested that we could take separate trips sometimes, that she could pursue hobbies and interests on her own, and that we could make our lifestyle more adventurous if that's what she wanted. But Emma said that her friends had convinced her that these compromises weren't enough. According to them, the only way for her to truly discover herself and reach her potential was to be completely single and free from any romantic commitments. Emma moved out of our house and into a downtown apartment with Madison, who had convinced her that living in the city would open up a whole world of opportunities and experiences that suburban married life couldn't offer. Emma was excited about her new independence and seemed confident that this separation would help her figure out what she really wanted from life. For the first few weeks, Emma's social media was full of posts about her fabulous new single life. She and her friends would go out every night, trying new restaurants, attending networking events, going to art galleries, and dancing until the early hours of the morning. Emma looked happy and free in all her photos, and I started to wonder if maybe her friends had been right and I really had been holding her back from living her best life. But as the weeks turned into months, I started noticing changes in Emma's posts and attitude. The constant partying seemed to be taking a toll on her physically and financially. She looked tired in her photos, and she started complaining about being exhausted all the time. The expensive dinners and bar tabs were clearly straining her budget, especially since she was now paying rent on a downtown apartment instead of splitting our mortgage. Emma also started posting about the challenges of dating in her 30s, which was apparently not as glamorous as her friends had made it seem. She would complain about men who only wanted hookups, dates who turned out to be completely different from their online profiles, and the exhausting process of constantly meeting new people and starting over with someone new. Meanwhile, her friends were starting to show their true colors now that Emma was single and available to be their full-time party companion. They expected her to be available whenever they wanted to go out, and they would guilt her if she ever wanted to stay home or save money instead of joining their expensive adventures. Rachel started borrowing money from Emma regularly and never paying it back. Madison expected Emma to split the cost of their shared apartment equally even though Madison's bedroom was twice the size of Emma's. Chloe would invite Emma on expensive trips and then pressure her to pay more than her fair share because Emma was the only one with a stable job. Emma started calling me occasionally, ostensibly to check on how I was doing, but really to vent about her frustrations with single life. She would complain about how expensive everything was, how exhausting it was to constantly be meeting new people, and how superficial the dating scene seemed to be. She also started making comments about how nice it was to talk to someone who actually knew her and cared about her as a person, rather than someone who was just trying to impress her or get something from her. She said she missed having someone stable and reliable in her life who she could count on no matter what. These conversations gave me hope that Emma was starting to realize that the grass wasn't actually greener on the single side, and that what we had built together was valuable and worth fighting for. But every time I suggested that maybe she should consider coming home, she would backtrack and say that she was still figuring things out and needed more time. The turning point came 2 months ago when Emma called me crying at 2 a.m. She had gone on a date with a guy she met through a dating app, and he had turned out to be married and looking for an affair. When Emma confronted him about lying to her, he had become aggressive and made her feel unsafe, and she had to call an Uber to get home from the restaurant. Emma was shaken by the experience and said that she felt stupid for not being better at reading people's intentions. She said that when we were together, she never had to worry about whether someone had ulterior motives or was being honest with her because she trusted me completely. I comforted Emma and told her that she shouldn't blame herself for trusting someone who had lied to her, and that unfortunately there were a lot of dishonest people in the dating world. But I also pointed out that this was exactly the kind of situation that her friends had convinced her was exciting and adventurous, when in reality it was just stressful and potentially dangerous. Emma admitted that dating was much harder and less fun than her friends had made it seem, and that she was starting to question whether the single life was really what she wanted. She said that her friends kept telling her that she just needed to adjust to being independent and that eventually she would love the freedom, but she was beginning to think that maybe freedom wasn't worth the loneliness and uncertainty. But the real wake-up call came a month ago when Emma discovered that her friends had been talking behind her back about how jealous they were of the life she had given up. Madison had been telling mutual acquaintances that Emma was crazy for leaving a good husband and a beautiful house to live in a cramped apartment and deal with the dating scene in her 30s. Rachel had been saying that if she had what Emma had, she would never have been stupid enough to throw it away for a few years of partying. Chloe had been telling people that Emma would definitely come crawling back to me within a year because she wasn't strong enough to handle real independence. Emma was devastated to learn that the same friends who had convinced her to leave her marriage were now mocking her decision and betting on her failure. She realized that they had encouraged her to blow up her life not because they thought it would make her happy, but because they couldn't stand to see her in a stable, loving relationship when they were all struggling to find the same thing. Emma came to see me last week and admitted that leaving our marriage had been the biggest mistake of her life. She said that her friends had convinced her that she was missing out on something amazing, but that single life had turned out to be lonely, expensive, and emotionally exhausting. She apologized for listening to people who didn't have her best interests at heart and for throwing away 9 years of marriage because she was afraid of missing out on experiences that turned out to be much less fulfilling than advertised. Emma begged me to give her another chance and said that she would cut contact with the friends who had poisoned her against our marriage. But here's the thing, I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago when Emma left. Those months of being abandoned by the person I trusted most in the world changed me, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I want from a relationship and what I'm willing to accept. I've realized that while Emma may have been influenced by her toxic friends, she still made the choice to believe them over her own husband. She chose to trust the opinions of bitter single women over the evidence of her own happy marriage. She chose to risk everything we had built together because she was afraid she might be missing out on something better. Emma's decision to leave wasn't just about her friends' influence, it was about her character and her priorities. A person who truly valued their marriage wouldn't have been so easily convinced to throw it away, no matter how persuasive their friends were. I told Emma that I needed time to think about whether I wanted to rebuild our marriage with someone who had shown that their commitment to me was conditional on not receiving better offers. I said that her willingness to abandon our relationship because her friends convinced her she was settling made me question whether she had ever really appreciated what we had together. Emma has been trying to prove that she's changed and that she's learned from her mistakes, but I'm not sure that 6 months of single life is enough to undo 9 years of taking our marriage for granted. I need to decide whether I can trust her not to run away again the next time someone convinces her that she deserves better than what we have. The irony is that Emma's friends got exactly what they wanted. They destroyed a happy marriage and pulled their friend down to their level of relationship dysfunction. But now that Emma has experienced what they were trying to sell her, she realizes that what they called freedom was actually just loneliness with better marketing. I'm not sure what I'm going to decide about Emma's request for reconciliation, but I do know that if we're going to have any chance of rebuilding our marriage, she's going to have to prove that she can resist the influence of people who don't want to see her happy. And more importantly, she's going to have to convince me that she actually values what we had enough to fight for at this time. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since Emma asked me to give our marriage another chance, and the situation has become even more complicated as Emma's so-called friends have revealed their true nature now that she's trying to rebuild her life with me. After I told Emma that I needed time to think about reconciliation, she apparently went back to her apartment and told Madison and Rachel that she was hoping to work things out with me. Their reactions were not what you would expect from supportive friends who wanted Emma to be happy. Madison completely lost it and accused Emma of being weak and pathetic for wanting to go back to her boring suburban life after she had worked so hard to help Emma discover her independence. She said that Emma was throwing away all the progress she had made in learning to be a strong, independent woman. Rachel was even worse and told Emma that crawling back to me would prove that she was just another basic woman who couldn't handle real freedom and needed a man to take care of her. She said that Emma would be embarrassing herself and disappointing everyone who had supported her journey of self-discovery. Both women made it clear that if Emma went back to me, they would consider it a personal betrayal of their friendship and everything they had tried to teach her about living her best life. They essentially gave Emma an ultimatum: choose them and the single life, or choose me and lose their friendship forever. Emma called me crying after this conversation and told me that she was shocked by how selfish and manipulative her friends were being. She said that she finally understood that they had never actually cared about her happiness, they had just wanted her to be as miserable and lonely as they were. But here's where things get really twisted. When Emma didn't immediately agree to forget about reconciling with me, Madison and Rachel started actively sabotaging her attempts to rebuild her life. Madison told Emma that she had to move out of their shared apartment within 30 days because having a married woman living there would ruin the single girl vibe they had worked so hard to create. She claimed that Emma's presence would make it harder for them to bring dates home and that Emma was no longer fun to live with now that she wasn't fully committed to the single lifestyle. Rachel started spreading rumors among their mutual friends that Emma was only trying to get back together with me because she couldn't handle supporting herself financially and needed a man to pay her bills. She told people that Emma had been complaining constantly about money and that she was basically looking for a sugar daddy to rescue her from the consequences of her independence. Chloe, who had been traveling for work during most of this drama, came back to town and immediately sided with Madison and Rachel. She told Emma that she was disappointed to see her giving up on herself so easily and that going back to me would be admitting that women couldn't really make it on their own. The three of them started a group chat without Emma and began planning girls' nights and activities without inviting her. They made a point of posting photos from their outings on social media so Emma would see that they were having fun without her and didn't need her friendship anymore. Emma was devastated by this betrayal because she realized that these women who had claimed to be her sisters and support system had only been interested in her when she was serving their agenda. The moment she started making decisions that didn't align with their vision of what her life should look like, they turned on her completely. But the most shocking revelation came when Emma found out what Rachel had been doing behind the scenes during the entire time Emma was separated from me. Emma discovered that Rachel had been sending me messages on social media throughout our separation, trying to flirt with me and asking if I wanted to meet up for coffee to talk about Emma. She had been positioning herself as a sympathetic ear who understood what I was going through and who could help me process my feelings about the situation. When Emma confronted Rachel about these messages, Rachel claimed that she had been trying to help repair our marriage by keeping communication open between us. But the messages Emma showed me told a very different story. Rachel had been telling me that Emma was enjoying her single life too much to ever come back, and that I should consider moving on with someone who would actually appreciate me. She had been suggesting that Emma wasn't mature enough for marriage and that I deserved someone more stable and committed. At the same time, Rachel had been positioning herself as exactly the kind of stable, mature woman I should be interested in. She had been telling me about her job promotion, her new apartment, and her decision to focus on finding a serious relationship instead of casual dating. It was clear that Rachel had been trying to swoop in and steal Emma's husband while pretending to be a supportive friend. She had encouraged Emma to leave me not because she thought it would make Emma happy, but because she wanted me for herself. When Emma realized that one of her closest friends had been actively trying to steal her husband while encouraging her to destroy her marriage, she completely cut contact with all three women and blocked them on all social media platforms. Emma has spent the past few weeks reflecting on how she allowed these toxic people to manipulate her into making the worst decision of her life. She's been going to individual therapy to understand why she was so susceptible to their influence and to learn how to trust her own judgment instead of being swayed by people who don't have her best interests at heart. Emma also quit her job at the marketing firm because she realized that the single co-workers there had been reinforcing the same toxic messages her friends were sending. She's found a new job at a smaller company where most of her colleagues are married with families and where the office culture is more supportive of work-life balance. She's moved back into our house, but we're sleeping in separate bedrooms while we work through the process of rebuilding trust and intimacy. Emma understands that she can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to the way it was before she decided that other people's opinions were more important than our marriage. Emma has been making real efforts to show me that she's learned from her mistakes and that she's committed to prioritizing our relationship over outside influences. She's been planning date nights, cooking my favorite meals, and doing small things to show me that she appreciates our life together instead of taking it for granted. But more importantly, Emma has been working on understanding why she was so easily convinced that she was missing out on something better. She's realized that she had been comparing our real, everyday life to other people's highlight reels and that she had unrealistic expectations about what happiness and fulfillment should look like. Emma has also apologized for putting me through months of uncertainty and pain because she needed to find herself when she could have done that work within our marriage if she had been willing to communicate honestly about her feelings instead of listening to people who wanted to see us fail. The therapy sessions have been helpful in understanding how Emma became so susceptible to her friends' manipulation, but they've also revealed some deeper issues about Emma's self-esteem and decision-making that we need to continue working on. Emma has admitted that she's always been someone who seeks validation from others and that she was more concerned with what her friends thought about her choices than with what actually made her happy. She's working on developing stronger boundaries and learning to trust her own instincts instead of constantly seeking approval from others. I'm cautiously optimistic about the progress we're making, but I'm also aware that rebuilding a marriage after this kind of betrayal takes time and consistent effort from both people. Emma destroyed my trust in her judgment and her commitment, and earning that back is going to require more than just cutting off toxic friends and going to therapy. But I will say that seeing how quickly her friends turned on her when she didn't follow their agenda has been validating for me. It proves that I was right to be concerned about their influence on our marriage and that they never actually cared about Emma's well-being. Emma's former friends have continued to try to contact her through mutual acquaintances, alternating between trying to guilt her into resuming their friendships and spreading rumors about how our reconciliation won't last because Emma isn't strong enough to handle real independence. But Emma has stayed strong in maintaining no contact with them, and she's told anyone who will listen the truth about how they manipulated her into destroying her marriage and then turned on her when she tried to fix her mistakes. The next few months will be crucial in determining whether Emma and I can truly rebuild our marriage or whether the damage from her decision to prioritize her friends' opinions over our relationship is too significant to overcome. Final update. It's been 6 months since Emma asked me to give our marriage another chance, and I wanted to provide a final update on how everything turned out because this whole experience taught me some important lessons about the power of toxic friendships and the importance of protecting your relationship from people who don't want to see you succeed. Emma and I have been working with a marriage counselor for the past 5 months, and I'm happy to report that we've made significant progress in rebuilding our relationship and addressing the issues that made Emma vulnerable to her friends' manipulation in the first place. The therapy process helped us understand that Emma's decision to leave wasn't just about her friends' influence, although that was certainly a major factor. Emma had been feeling insecure about whether she had missed out on important experiences by getting married young, and her friends exploited those insecurities by constantly telling her that she was settling for less than she deserved. Emma has taken full responsibility for choosing to listen to people who were actively working against our marriage instead of talking to me about her fears and concerns. She's admitted that she was looking for external validation instead of finding satisfaction in the life we had built together. The individual therapy Emma has been doing has helped her understand why she was so susceptible to peer pressure and why she valued her friends' opinions more than her own judgment. She's learned to recognize when people are trying to manipulate her and to trust her own instincts instead of constantly seeking approval from others. Most importantly, Emma has learned to appreciate what we have instead of constantly wondering if there's something better out there. She's realized that the grass isn't greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it, and she had been so focused on other people's lawns that she forgot to tend to her own garden. The reconciliation process hasn't been easy, and there were definitely moments when I wasn't sure we would be able to rebuild the trust and intimacy that Emma's departure had damaged. But Emma's commitment to change and her willingness to do the hard work of examining her own behavior convinced me that she was serious about making our marriage a priority. Emma has also made significant changes in how she approaches friendships and outside influences. She's developed new friendships with women who are in committed relationships and who support the idea of marriage as a partnership rather than a limitation. She's learned to be more selective about whose opinions she values and to prioritize my thoughts and feelings over those of casual acquaintances or coworkers. As for her former friends, their true nature became even more apparent after Emma cut contact with them. Rachel continued trying to contact me through various social media platforms and dating apps, making it clear that her interest in helping our marriage had really been about positioning herself as my next relationship. Madison started a blog about female empowerment and independence where she frequently writes about friends who betray the sisterhood by choosing men over their female friendships. It's obvious that she's writing about Emma, and she's turned Emma's decision to save her marriage into content for her personal brand. Chloe has apparently been telling mutual friends that Emma's reconciliation with me proves that women of our generation are too weak to handle real independence and that feminism has failed because women keep choosing security over freedom. She's used Emma's situation as evidence for her theories about why modern women can't succeed on their own. The fact that all three women responded to Emma's happiness with such bitterness and manipulation confirmed that their advice had never been about helping Emma live her best life. They had been projecting their own insecurities and failures onto Emma's marriage because they couldn't stand to see her succeed where they had failed. Emma and I have also learned to protect our relationship from outside influences by establishing better boundaries with friends, family, and coworkers. We've agreed that major relationship decisions should be discussed between us first, and that we won't allow other people's opinions to override our own judgment about what's best for our marriage. We've also worked on improving our communication so that if either of us is feeling unfulfilled or concerned about our relationship, we can address those issues together instead of seeking validation from people who might not have our best interests at heart. The experience of almost losing our marriage because of toxic friends has actually made our relationship stronger in many ways. We have a deeper appreciation for what we have together, and we're more committed to protecting our partnership from people who would rather see us fail than succeed. Emma and I renewed our wedding vows 2 months ago in a small ceremony with only our immediate families present. It was a beautiful way to symbolize our commitment to starting fresh and building a marriage based on mutual respect, trust, and communication rather than outside expectations or comparisons to other people's relationships. We've also started planning for the family we've always wanted, and Emma is excited about becoming a mother instead of viewing it as a limitation on her independence. She's realized that building a life with someone you love and creating a family together is actually the ultimate form of self-actualization, not a barrier to it. Looking back on this whole experience, I'm grateful that it happened in some ways because it forced us to examine our relationship and address issues that might have caused problems down the road. Emma's temporary departure was devastating, but it also showed both of us how much we value what we have together. I've learned that not all friends have your best interests at heart, and that some people will actively try to sabotage your happiness if it threatens their own narrative about what life should look like. Emma learned that external validation is a poor substitute for genuine satisfaction and that the opinions of bitter, lonely people are not worth more than the love of a committed partner. The most important lesson we've both learned is that marriage is a choice you make every day, not just on your wedding day. Emma chose poorly for several months by prioritizing her friends' opinions over our relationship, but she's been choosing well ever since she realized her mistake. Our marriage is stronger now than it was before this whole ordeal began because we've both learned to value what we have and to protect it from people who would rather see us fail than succeed. Emma's former friends thought they were helping her escape from a limiting relationship, but they actually helped her realize that she was already living her best life and just needed to appreciate it. The final irony is that while Emma's friends claimed that marriage was holding her back from reaching her potential, it was actually their toxic influence that was limiting her growth and happiness. Once Emma freed herself from their manipulation and negativity, she was able to become the person she was meant to be within the context of a loving, supportive marriage. Emma and I are planning a trip to Europe next month to celebrate our renewed commitment to each other and to enjoy the kind of adventure that her friends claimed married people couldn't have. The difference is that we'll be sharing this experience together instead of using it to escape from our real lives. I hope this story serves as a warning to other couples about the danger of allowing toxic friends to influence your relationship decisions. Not everyone who claims to want what's best for you actually has your best interests at heart, and sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most threatened by your happiness and success. Protect your marriage from people who see your partnership as a threat to their worldview, and remember that the grass is always greener where you water it, not where someone else tells you it should be.